tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
I want to shift from the national to the local here because there is a national tie-in, of course. Toronto this week had massive flooding. I saw some of the just horrendous videos of people that were getting their cars just covered in water. I think the DVP or the ramp onto the DVP was terrible, and you had a cascading waterfall down the steps of Union Station. I was nervous that Howard Levitt, a lawyer you may recall, he's been on the show before, when there was flooding in Toronto a decade ago, he famously ditched his $200,000 Ferrari because he had a plane to catch. And I was thinking this week that someone should do a welfare check on Howard Levitt's new car. But all of that notwithstanding, the flooding was there. And Brian Lilley in the Toronto Sun had a great piece out where he talked about how much this exposes how so much of Toronto's priorities have been on these luxury items, on these virtue signaling plans like bike lanes as far as the eye can see, when core infrastructure just isn't there. But no, it's not infrastructure to blame, Olivia Chow says. It is people with big driveways.
I do want to talk a bit about climate change. It's real. We are expecting sort of almost doubling the number of severe rainstorm days in 15 years. So we have to redouble our effort to have mitigating actions because we have to do more prevention work. If you're talking about long-term mitigation effort, providing incentives for homeowners and for people that have big parking space because the stormwater are not running off properly, the ground is not absorbing the rain. As a result, the runoff is severe and it causes even more flooding. And that's one of the reasons why basements are flooded. It is a severe problem, and we really seriously have to deal with climate change because these kind of days are going to be a lot more frequent.
Brian Lilley from the Toronto Sun returns to our program, and it's always good to see you, Brian. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. And you thought of Howard Levitt's car. Very good point. I thought, it's raining hard. Has anyone checked on the Science Center? Because if you've been following Ontario politics, you'd think that the Ontario Science Center was the be-all and end-all. Quite frankly, if you don't live in or near Toronto, you forget it exists. And if you live in Toronto, you forget it exists. But one of the reasons they closed it was the roof was in danger of imminent collapse from heavy rainfall or snowfall. And that was pretty heavy rainfall the other day. But can I read you something from a little while ago that the city put out when it comes to rain? I'm going to throw on my glasses here and read this direct. City Council said that they need to start planning and developing new programs for future disaster mitigation, including urban flooding, that reflect the reality of climate change and include investments for municipal water and sewer infrastructure that can mitigate the risks from future storm events that are anticipated to increase both in frequency and severity. Andrew, that was written in a report for the July 2013 flood, and it was published September 2013. So that's 11 years ago. And where did the city flood on Tuesday? In exactly the same places. And just to give you one more tidbit, we had 70% of the rain that they had back in 2013. It's almost 140 millimeters back in 2013. We didn't even crack 100 millimeters. Parts of the city got close, about 98 millimeters, so about 3 to 3.5 inches. But most of the city didn't get that, and we still saw that massive flooding. So if you're going to invoke climate change, then show the courage of your convictions and actually do something. But instead, politicians, whether it's Justin Trudeau or Olivia Chow, they just want to use climate change like a get-out-of-jail-free card in Monopoly.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I mean, the obvious point to some, but I don't think it gets enough discussion, which is that they invest in and they spend, I use their language for a moment, it's not investing, they spend. They spend money on all the things that don't matter. I mean, they spend money on bike lanes, which in a lot of ways, yes, there's a place for them, but nowhere near the extent to which they're looked at. And you certainly see that in, Calgary and Edmonton, when those cities, which you can ride your bike in, 3 days a year, basically, do it. But in Toronto, it's like, yeah, we've got all these bike lanes, but we don't have enough maintenance for water downpours.
So Olivia Chow said that the city is something like $26 billion in the hole for infrastructure over the next 10 years. That's 2.6 billion a year. That on average. Well, why aren't you putting the money into that? Instead, we're renaming Yonge Dundas Square to Sankofa, a word that means nothing to most Torontonians. We had to all look it up and ask what it means, and then find out there was a bizarre story behind it. They've just approved another 100 kilometers of bike lanes. Now, if you're in the downtown core like I am, some of these bike lanes get used heavily. And, sometimes I use them. I walk, I cycle, I take the subway, I drive. Whatever mode of transport works for me, that's what I use. But there are parts of the city where they are going to be expanding the bike tracks in ways that make no sense because the traffic isn't there. They're trying to induce demand. They tell us we can't build more roads because it'll cause more people to drive, but they're building more bike tracks for the same reason. They want more people on bikes. They want more people out of their cars. Okay, fine. That's a nice to have. When your sewer infrastructure does not work and can't handle, they're talking about this as a once in a century storm. It's not a once in a century storm. It's not even close to that. It's a heavy day of rain that was preceded by several other days of mild to medium rain. Our city infrastructure should be able to handle that. And if you keep saying climate change is real, like Olivia Chow kept saying this week, climate change is real and we have to mitigate it. Okay, part of your mitigation measures is making sure that your sewers can work, but they're not doing that. It's beyond frustrating that most of the media is letting her get away with this. I said it on Tuesday afternoon. We can't let her get away with this. And so far, everybody has. They're just, oh, yeah, climate change. Okay, well, then what are you going to do about it?
Well, and it's also, we're a country, and Toronto is no exception to this, that gets a lot of snow. And when that snow melts, there is a lot of water sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there is the, no pun intended, perfect storm that comes down. So the idea that this is not something we should be prepared for is just absolutely the most unconvincing argument ever.
Absolutely. And as far as being prepared for it, look, we have an emergency operations center in the city of Toronto that was stood up early Tuesday morning, and we still had the DVP flood. If you're not from Toronto, you don't live here, it's a major highway that runs into the city. The city could have and should have shut it down early. It runs next to the Don River, which flooded, and it flooded over the Don Valley Parkway, turned it into the Don Valley Seaway. They should have had that shut down earlier. And the fact that they didn't was poor management. And I know that True North clipped some of the same things that I did from Mayor Chow's scrum. She came out and was completely unprepared. So between the Emergency Management Center not getting this right and shutting down highways and roads that were completely flooded before cars ended up in them, before we needed to rescue a dozen drivers, that should have happened, but it didn't due to bad management. Chow came out and couldn't answer basic questions. Why? Bad management. Either she did not ask the questions that needed to be asked that she knew journalists would be asking, like, why wasn't it closed earlier? I don't know. Which other roads are closed? One's near rivers. These were horrific answers that, I've shown it to political staffers across the spectrum because they said, no way, no, she didn't say that. I'd send them the clip and they all have the same reaction. Oh my goodness, how did she go out to speak like that? We can all clap back at the boys in the short pants or the kids that brief politicians, but they're there for a reason, and that's to make sure that they have the information to share with the public. Chow didn't ask for it. Her staff didn't give it to her. She looks foolish. The whole city looks foolish. And in the meantime, once we're through it all, she just says, climate change, get out of jail free. I don't need to put money into things that are beneath the ground that people can't see. I can invest in shiny new things that will get me votes. And unfortunately, that's what politicians do across the country. And she's also going to try and, you mentioned the big parking pads.
Yeah.
Do you know why she's doing that?
Why?
Because she wants a rain tax.
Oh, is that so? It is that, yeah. Because they walked back on that one a couple of months back when there was so much incredible pushback. But that, you don't think that's dead forever?
No, I don't. Look, the rain tax exists in many municipalities. It might surprise you where it does. Just in and around here, I believe it's Kitchener, Mississauga, Orillia, or just a few. But my colleague Warren Kinsella, he wrote on it back in March. We put her on the front page of the Toronto Sun. I believe we had her in a singing in the rain pose and a yellow slicker. And
I love that. God bless the Toronto Sun.
We have fun. But, we talked about it as a serious issue, and it is. The rain tax is something that every progressive politician that I've covered for the last 2 to 3 decades, I've been at this about 25 years. What doesn't matter where I've covered City Hall, at some point, someone tries to push for a rain tax. And it's like a carbon tax. They say it's for a specific environmental cause. It just goes in general revenues. It's like the people that say, we need to improve the taxes to improve the roads. It just goes in general revenues, and they spend it on whatever they want. The roads aren't better. The temperature doesn't go down. The rain doesn't stop falling. They want to tax you for every square inch of your roof, your deck, your patio stones, your walkway up to your door, your driveway. That's what they want to do. And it's all just another way, another revenue tool, as Kathleen Wynne used to say in the hallowed halls of Queen's Park, where I'm sitting now. It's a revenue tool. That's all it is.
Yeah, it'll have, Toronto, talk about the great city-rural divide, because Torontonians are just like praying for drought because they'll save a few dollars, whereas everyone in the real world realizes how they need rain. You just got to prepare for it. Brian Lilley, always great reading your stuff in the Toronto Sun, including this piece of yours on the whole to-do about the flooding in Toronto. Great stuff, and thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.